Hi everyone. This year Lifem has appointed its inaugural Artistic Director, and we're delighted that experienced contemporary music publisher and promoter Gill Graham has accepted the role. Gill will programme her first full festival next year in 2021, but her influence is already being felt in this year's event. So I'm here with Gill today, so thank you, Gill, for joining us.
Pleasure, good to see you, Emma.
Yeah, and basically we're just going to ask you a couple of questions and get to know you, so our festival goers can get to know you as well.
Great.
So Gill, you're obviously very well known in contemporary music circles, but how would you describe and introduce yourself to the early music community?
Ooh. I don't think I've ever put myself in any sort of boxes, really, musically, having sort of studied music at college and stuff. And I think I've been connected to the early music community for all my working life, really. You know, from being a student in London, fixing orchestras for James Goodard that had to get Crispy and Steele Perkins in to play, you know, the natural trumpet, and Sue Dent on natural horn, through to working at the Royal College of Music, where we had a Baroque orchestra, as it was then known, in collaboration with the Royal Academy. You know, not one college had enough people studying early music, certainly at that time in the early 90s. I know it's different now. And, you know, I met some of the great sort of luminaries of the time, like Dennis Darlow, who ran the Handel Festival at Hanover Square, and Cat McIntosh, great violin player, Alison Berry, all of those. And interestingly, actually, a lot of the students who were in that band at the time are now doing extremely well. You know, people like Tati Theo and the Brook Street Band, or Adrian Chandler, Serenissima. Lawrence Cummings, even, you know, who's gone on to become one of the great sort of harpsichord directors. And you know, and they all kind of studied with these great people like Robert Woolley and Dennis. So I've never really felt detached from it, whilst my own journey really went through contemporary music, and now in publishing, where, you know, I go to our concerts, but I also go to other concerts, you know, early music concerts, and very much enjoy all types of music. But in particular, I think people say to me, do you listen to contemporary music at home? And I say, yes, sometimes, but often it's early music I'll listen to.
What was your favourite thing from last year's festival that you saw?
I've got two favourite things, and they're both really different. One was the fanfare that Piva gave at the opening reception, and I not really experienced anything quite as vital and brilliant as that for a long time. You know, just that sound world and that spirit, you know. I thought, oh wow. And then off we went in a sort of dark November night into the church, and a beautiful concert by Solomon's Knot, you know. And it was just extraordinary to hear those two very different but both super high quality offerings
Yeah,
from the festival. It was great.
complete extremes of early
Yeah.
music. Yeah, no, definitely. So going back to this year, 2020 has obviously been a baptism of fire by many measures. So how have you responded to the COVID-19 pandemic generally, but we're particularly in regard to Lifem this year?
But I think suppose it's a mixture of sheer terror and enlightenment, really. You know, the fact that watching the live music industry dry up over a period of 4 months has been very frightening and very worrying. Whereas at the same time, it's been really encouraging to see the resolve of musicians from all parts of the world and all sectors committing to keeping going, you know, in very dire times. And, you know, personally, I miss the energy of people. You know, if we were having this conversation sitting in your living room, there'd be a different energy we'd both be getting from it. And I think possibly be the first person to commit homicide by Zoom at some point. But certainly it's been very difficult, and I've been really heartened by the fact people have just kept on going, really.
Yeah. And obviously we're announcing that Lifem is going to be digital this year. So I mean, that's a choice that's been taken by a lot of festivals this year to sort of keep them going. And obviously, as you mentioned, so many performers are going to digital platforms. You know, the amount of teaching that now happens on Zoom is probably
Yeah.
wildly different to what it was before. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think putting the festival online, you know, it's an eclectic offering, and also the competitions going online, the competition final, and having the opportunity really to sort of reach outside Blackheath to an international audience, I think is an exciting positive that comes from that action. And it's been great. All the performers, you know, Fretwork and Tabea and Mahan, all very, very enthusiastic about giving this opportunity to people online, as opposed to us just throwing our hands up and going, we can't do it, there's nobody there. I'm really looking forward to the online exhibition as well, because I've been to the early music exhibition a long time ago, and I went again last year, and I'm forever fascinated by the amount of high quality dedicated craftsmanship that you find in that exhibition hall. And I bought some little whistles from Terry Mann last year, and I knew Terry when he was a contemporary composer, and there he was selling these amazing instruments. You know, it's like both my worlds went boom, and I bought a whistle. It's great.
And as you say, for people who can't actually get there, especially international people, actually really nice to just open up the festival to them as well.
Yeah, and I think it'd be good for the competition finalists, you know, introducing them to a sort of, if you like, a broader network.
Yeah, definitely. So you obviously have a hugely strong connection to living composers and creators in your kind of main job. But how would you describe the relevance and importance to them of early instruments and early repertoire, or would you?
I would actually, because, you know, without the canon of music from the centuries, living composers would have very little to sit back and have a resource from. Do you know what I mean? You know, you can't get away, or you shouldn't try and get away from what's gone before. And that really, I think, influences people. You know, people like John Taverner, John Rutter, Jonathan Dove, Howells, you know, without that, you know, the Puritans in Notre Dame in the 12th, 13th century, you know, their music wouldn't be as rich and as fantastic. So I think it's really important that today's composers are aware of their history and aware how it affects them. You know, whether it's someone like Michael Nyman, who is a very, very, very erudite and well-studied a scholar of Purcell's music, you can hear that in some of his music.
Definitely.
And it's rich. There's a rich tapestry. I mean, interestingly, I was teaching a course for graduate composers in the US 2 summers ago, and they all brought in their pieces, and not one of them sounded like what you'd call music, and not one of them gave instrumentalist music to play. It was like all about hitting the pads on the flutes or squawking the clarinet mouthpiece or stuff. And I was like, guys, you know, this, you can maybe do this once you've learned your craft, but this is ridiculous. And I sent them overnight, their homework was to go and harmonize Bach chorales, and one of them managed to do it. You know, so I think our musical history and culture is so important, and the early music, you know, the fact that early music from the 12th, 13th, 17th, 18th century has survived, you know, for this long is a testament to its quality. And to be unique in your musical voice is very difficult for a composer these days because of that. But I think they should continue to try.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
And from the instrument point of view, you know, it was probably 20 odd years ago, Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment and AAM were commissioning composers to write for early instruments. People like John Woolrich, Thea Musgrave. I remember being involved in a piece with Thea, And she came out, it was at the Wigmore Hall, and we came out of rehearsal. She said, you know, I'm going to write for natural horns because it really sounds like they're trying, you know. And, you know, and that was a very positive thing for her. And John Paul Jones, who's writing for this year's festival, introduced me to the racket, actually.
Fantastic.
We were talking to him about would he come and write a piece for fretwork. He said, as long as my fee involves a racket, you know, and I find out about that. So I think composers have been fascinated by the color and the timbre and the variety of texture that they can get from writing for early music instruments. And there's so many great performers in that genre that it's lovely when it all comes together like that.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was at Trinity, there was a kind of collaboration between the composing department and the early music departments, where the composers kind of were assigned sort of groups of us and had to write a piece for a group that we performed. And yeah, the results were really, really interesting. Some things worked, some didn't,
Well,
as always. But yeah, it was really nice that the composers were kind of like, oh wow, there's this whole different sound world. Because obviously, if you get things like crumb horns or something, you just don't get anything like that in a modern instruments.
No, and I think when you do and it works, it's beautiful, isn't it? You know, I'm very much a fan of composers, for whatever instruments they're writing for, to really have a sort of performer bias, you know, to really work with performers to look at what's possible, what's not possible, because, you know, some composers forget the performers are trying to do their best for them. So they need to kind of just work out what that best can be and write to the strengths. And everyone I've met in the early music community has been absolutely 100% on board with that.
And just going back to Lifem, so going forward, what's your vision for Lifem sort of next year, and also over your sort of tenure, what do you want to achieve?
I was thinking about this. I go to festivals to experience something I can't experience anywhere else. And that's what I experienced at Lifem last year. And that's what I really want to build on that, you know, there's some very unique performers who don't get the exposure perhaps that they deserve in a sort of crowded, limited market. And I'm really interested in the old and the new coming together, and whether that is performers playing on new instruments by the wonderful makers that come to the exhibition, or whether that's composers writing for old instruments. And I'm also interested, certainly for next year, in the, you know, what was the sort of pop music of the time, you know, and bringing back, you know, bringing to our population, if you like, that popular culture of the time, whether it's Purcell catches or whatever it is. I'm interested in exploring that. And I guess watch this space. There's so much to choose from. So it's a bit of a luxury, I have to say.
Well, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon, Jill, on this
Thanks, Emma.
not so sunny afternoon anymore.
Bye.
Yeah.